Welcome in, everybody, to Flag for Discussion, episode 7 for Monday, May 26th. Happy Memorial Day. Today, we celebrate, honor, and thank all the brave men and women who fought for this country. Speaking of countries, Jace, welcome back to this one.
Thank you. I'm excited. I had a burger with bacon and a fried egg tonight in celebration of being back in the US and Memorial Day.
Hey, that's real American of you. But I kind of jumped the gun. My name's Fabo Merkazi. He's Jace Hatfield. To Jace, I wanted to take today a little bit light on you since I know you just got back from an overseas trip. But I hate to break it to you, and you know it. I think we got the most packed show we've ever had. We're gonna start out talking, kind of going over like a database of sorts of the top coaches in the country, the most interesting again. But where are their programs right now? Where is recruiting? Where is the program trajectory? Do fans have hope? We're going to give a ranking for each of the programs that we chose. We're going to get into the most prevalent conversation going on right now, not named the college football playoff, but the Arch Manning conversation. We're going to
hmm
go into why college football traditions are dying, USC's being a part of it. Oh, boo-hoo. And then we're gonna wrap it up with a little old-fashioned kind of picking a game. It's a little early, but why not? Let's pick that game. Before we get started, though, we have to pop our socials. Follow us on Twitter at
hmm
F4Discussion. Subscribe on YouTube, Flagged for Discussion. TikTok, Flagged for Discussion. We are everywhere. Apple Podcast, Spotify, Audible. It feels good to just be back as a duo. Jason, I don't know how you
You
feel.
killed it.
I tried, but it was tough, and it got really hot in that room. I started wiping off sweat pretty quickly. But I'm not gonna lie. I don't know how you feel right now. I recorded last episode 6 on Saturday to be released on Monday last week. It's been over. It's only been like 10 days for me, and it feels like it's been forever. I don't know how you're feeling right now.
It does feel like it's been forever. I was so busy the last 2 weeks though. I like you're not really thinking much about it as you're just kind of going through, traveling and whatnot. And then yeah, coming back and then once we kind of logged on to Discord to do this for the first time, I was like, wow, I hadn't had to do this in a while. I had to do the update. I mean, that's
We
kind of how
we
you
both
know
had to
it's been a
update.
minute.
Yeah. All right. So Jace, we'll get a lot more into your trip towards the end of the podcast. I think all of the listeners want to know, and some exciting stuff happened. But first, as I mentioned, let's. Oh shoot. My bad. That was almost a technical error of me closing out our recording software.
Good
That would have
catch.
been bad. All right. So first, let's get into something, a new segment. We want to call it the program report. So we're gonna go over 2 to 4 coaches every episode. We have 4 categories assigned for each coach: coaching performance, recruiting vibes, program trajectory, the hope meter, and then the hot seat meter.
hmm
We're going to give Each of us are going to give a ranking 1 through 10, and we're going to average those out. Eventually, hopefully, by the end of the offseason, going into the regular season, we'll have a vast ranking system of all the programs in the country. And not only will that be a tool for us, but it's kind of a fun game for everyone to kind of just tune into and listen. Tell us if you hate our thoughts and opinions. Tell us if you love it or you agree, or if you're somewhere in the middle. This week, Jace, the
Yep.
first one we want to start out with is Dan Lanning, the head coach of the Oregon Ducks. Where, on a scale of 1 to 10, 3 years in, where would you rank Dan Lanning's coaching performance?
I tried hard to keep bias aside here and chug along with an objective mind as best as I could. I have him down as a 9.25 for his coaching performance. Might seem a little high off first glance, but I think when you dive into him a little bit, it's a little bit more, you have a little bit more confidence in this. So he's 35-6 as a head coach. He's only been head coach for 3 seasons now. 35-6 is one of the best starts in any college football head coach's history. It's also one of the best win percentages of active coaches in college football. He's never lost to an unranked opponent, which is very impressive. Not many guys can say that. He's also won a handful of big games and ranked games, done things. He's beat Ohio State in the regular season, not in the Rose Bowl. Blew out that Colorado team. That was supposed to be a ranked first ranked game. He's had some very impressive wins, and even a lot of his losses, other than the Rose Bowl loss, were tough, hard fought games against good opponents. Um, I think he's done a really good job in terms of like keeping them on track. They played 8 straight games last season, and I feel like he did a good job keeping them focused through all 8, and that's hard to do. The only knock on him is playoff success slash national championship. Doesn't have that kind of hardware. But there's only 3 active coaches that have a national championship. People throw around Natty like everyone's got one, and like you're the only team that doesn't. Only 3 active coaches have won one. So
Ryan
so
Day's in
it's
year
not like this
7 or
is a
6, and
crazy.
he just got his first one.
Yep. And that tied the fastest a coach had ever won one at an FBS school for the fastest start. Nick Saban being the other one, I think was 6 or 7 years in, whatever the Ryan Day one was. So if you're holding somebody to the echelon of, hey, you haven't done what would be the greatest thing of all time, you're on a pretty good trajectory, and at 39 years old too, as well. So 9.25, natty and playoff successes would creep him up in the next couple of years.
I think so. There might be a bit of a trend with my picks, might be a little lower than yours. The main point of I gave him an 8.5 for coaching performance. I think holistically, Dan Lanning is everything and more of what Oregon fans wanted him to be. Obviously, they would have loved that the Ohio State Rose Bowl win, or at least to show up in that game. But for me, I think if you look around the country, and yeah, there's a lot of haters, but his main detractors right now are looking at the 3 Washington losses. Some people question his aggressiveness on third and fourth downs, where people feel like he doesn't need to go for that. I personally see this the way we're ranking at 9.5. I feel like 9.5 is creeping into that tier of like peak Nick Saban, and I have a rating that's
Oh
over
wow,
that.
okay.
I just feel like if you're 9.5, you're humming. And while I think Dan Lanning and Oregon are very, 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 very close to humming, I don't think either of us would say they're there exactly where the program wants to be yet. He's about to enter his first year, I think, without any Mario Cristobal players on his roster.
hmm Except for Boschletter, he's back, but that's
Yeah,
it.
obviously some of that is COVID rules related with the extra eligibility, but I think Dan's been a phenomenal coach. Performance wise, he's always gets his team fired up. He's a really really good motivational coach. I just maybe 9.5 seeing like the Nick Saban peak is bad, but it's like if I think of how if point 0.5 close to the top 10, like a number 10 score, like that to me is you got to be really really special. And I think it's not that Dan's not there, not that, but it's that he's not there yet. So I'll give
Okay.
him an 8.5. He's been an excellent coach and everything that Oregon fans would want. I just don't want to creep into the nines just yet.
Okay. I respect that.
Let's move into category number 2, recruiting vibes.
I think we had similar ideas of where they were. We just used different numbers to explain. I'm at a 9.2. Kind of similar to what I said for coaching performance. I think he's got recruiting for Oregon in the top 4, top 5 nationally. Just hasn't crept in. Like I think, Kirby Smart is probably going to be like for me a 10.0. He's just pulling in any 5-star he wants. So 9.2 for me. I think he's first year at Oregon. I believe they were like 15, 16. His first ever recruiting class there. But after that, it's been consistent top 5. I think there were 4, 2, and 2 composite since then. Looking like he's going to put together another top 10 class in the future. He's always put together really impressive portal classes. You got Dylan Thieneman and Isaiah World this past year, who were kind of the 2 heavy hitting portal guys. Both became Ducks. So I think he cleans up on the recruiting trail really well. I also think uh, uh, NIL is really hard to project, but I think he outperforms Oregon's NIL standing, if that makes sense. I think Oregon's probably in that 10 to 15 NIL range, and I think he's recruiting them at top, like I said, I think top 5, top 4 every year. So for that, I think they got him at a 9.2. Again, not perfect. They don't get every 5-star. They just lost out on a handful of guys they really wanted, or at least seemingly really wanted. So that I think kind of knocked him back a little bit. But we've said it before. We have no fears
Yeah,
when it comes to Dan Lanning on the recruiting trail.
the people are down on him right now. Not necessarily because of his current class, but because USC's recruiting like animals and they're
Hmm.
killing it. And everyone's basically saying, "Oh no, is Oregon broke?" No, but with that said, I put this similar like what you said. I gave him an 8.75. I think 3 years. I know he's been here for four, been at Oregon for four. I don't count the 2022 recruiting class. A lot of those kids have developed and are studs on this year's team, but Dan had like two
Yeah.
months to recruit those guys.
Yeah. He put together, I think he went from like 58 when he took it over and got him all the way to like 14
Yeah,
in
something
a
like that.
matter of 2 months.
And then but if you look at like 3 years, the last 3 years, 2025 fifth nationally, 2024 third nationally, 2023 ninth nationally. It's three straight top 10 years. You can't do much better than that. And I know,
Hmm.
I think like a lot of Oregon fans think they should be nationally top five. It's just there's so many good players from the South. There's so much extra money out
Yep.
around all the programs that it's going to be tough to be there. But yeah, Dan can recruit at a top three, top two, top one level. I have no doubts that for whoever's down on the Ducks recruiting this year, that they're going to kind of push it back. Let's keep it moving. Fan trajectory and fan hope, program hope. So I want to preface this real quick. The Oregon one is the one that we're going to be the closest on and the highest on for today. So
Yep.
we're not going to be this high on everyone else. Let's go for program hope, program trajectory, Jace.
I had a 9.75, so we were pretty much the same there. Not much to be said. They recruit really well. They just had Justin Hopkins just released that article 2 days ago. He met with some anonymous Big Ten coaches. He didn't say who they were, and one of them had a great quote saying like Oregon's at a point where they're not a retool or a rebuild; they're a reload school. And the depth chart shows it. It's just like 5-star, backups a 5-star, third strings a high end 4-star. They kind of gotten into that position. I think they're producing Heisman contenders every season. Their over under win totals are constantly in the double digits. They're always one of the betting favorites to win championships now. So I think you're at a point where you're kind of asking when, as a fan, which is a good sign. I know we're both very hopeful about our future, and I think if you were new to college football and you could handpick any team to be a fan of based on just like what you think they could be, Oregon would be probably one of the top couple of choices. So for that reason, I'm going 9.75.
I think in general, there's not much else to add on to that. I have them at a 9.7. It could have been a
Mhm.
9.75. I don't know. I have them at a 9.7. Program hope, I think, goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the Dan Lanning conversation. Is Ryan Day became tied for one of the fastest to win a national championship in like his sixth or seventh year this past year. Dan's entering his what, fourth or fifth year? Like,
Fourth year,
eh,
yeah.
obviously the talent's there, but as you keep stacking recruiting classes, as you have one thing people don't talk about Oregon is the staff has been together and the staff has not been leaving. Obviously they might lose Will Stein next year or 2 years from now, but the familiarity everyone has with the staff, with the players, with the recruiting team, it just makes you hopeful if you're an Oregon fan for what's to come. So there's not much else to say there. This last one, I seriously don't think there's anything else to say. But for our fourth
Yeah.
meter, our fourth category for Dan Lanning, we have the hot seat meter. And I want to preface this also by saying we're ranking these reverse order. If I give
Mhm.
you a 10, that doesn't mean you're on the hottest seat for this one specifically. You have the coldest seat possible. If I give you a 1, obviously you're on the hottest seat. Uh, do you want to just say it at the same time? Three, two,
Yep.
one, 10.
10.
Yeah, it almost worked. We're almost there. But yeah, Dan Lanning is what I said. Everything Oregon fans, the athletic department, the administration could have wanted and more.
Yep.
So that brings Dan Lanning's average up to 9.39, which is going to be really hard for other teams, other schools, and other coaches to beat. But I'm sure we'll get there. Moving to Texas A&M.
This is a fun one.
Yeah, this one, Mike Elko. year two, where is his coaching performance in just year one and this offseason for you?
Yeah, yeah. Since it's been 1 year, this is a hard. He was a hard one to say. I gave him a 6.8. They went 8-5 in his first season with Mike Elko. Recruited in the top in like the 15 to 20 range with him first year. I don't put a whole lot of stock in that. Like, don't take the 6.8 as I think he's a bad coach. I think he's a great coach, and you'll see the rest of the rankings will reflect that. But 8-5 last year, they beat everybody they should have beat, and they lost to everybody that they were like, could we win this game? Maybe they lost all of those. So I think for that, you had like a decently good but not great season. I think going 0 for 5 in your coin flip games is obviously not a great performance. Going 8-0 against games you should win, that's also a great performance. So for that, I gave him a 6.8. I also was a little disappointed as Connor Wagaman kind of growth. A lot of people were referring to Mike Elko as maybe a QB whisperer with Riley Leonard and some of the work he had done at Duke. A lot of people thought that would translate into this 5-star kid and turning him into a superstar, and he ended up being a pretty big bust last year. I'm not knocking him out for his career, but he has transferred out of the program now. So I think that part also kind of held me back. That was a little disappointing.
Yeah, I gave a higher score here for him. I gave him a 7.5, and the main reason for that is I thought last year wasn't necessarily about wins for Texas A&M. I thought it was about cleaning up the mess that was left behind and setting a new culture, setting a new standard of expectations of organization. Be organized at practice, be organized on the field, communicate. There were parts of Elko that, I mean, I didn't love at the end of the year where he was like, I couldn't wait until the season was over so I didn't have to watch his defense anymore. Like, obviously he's being funny, but like, I didn't, you also don't love that. But
It's your defense, man. You're the
yeah,
coach.
you're the defensive coach. You're a defensive coach. It's your defense. So I think like Jimbo's teams, last year's team had a little bit of falling off the rails towards the end.
Mhm.
They started out not necessarily winning a ton of games, but they started out organized, and that I think was a good sign of a good coach, a detailed coach, and one who can communicate with his players, his staff. So I'm high on them going forward. I think Texas A&M is a place that, while they haven't done it, you can win big at. They have all the resources.
Yeah, I think they're the richest team in college football.
So it just, instead of just pouring money everywhere like the past administration did, let's pour it into the right players and the right places. So I think that's where my 7.5 comes. I don't, obviously it wasn't a great year. This year a lot of people are high on them. They could, so a lot of people are thinking
Mhm.
they're in for 8, 9, 10 win season. If they go 8-4, they have a tough schedule, but they could be knocking out some school. I think they're playing Auburn, Florida. They have some schools that they could be firing their head coaches after playing Texas A&M, which is also exciting.
Yeah.
Moving to category number 2, recruiting. Where are you recruiting vibes for Texas A&M and Mike Elko?
Got him at an 8.6. They've recruited even like with Mike Elko, I said they were in that like teens range. They had a good transfer portal cycle this time around. And then 2026 class is looking like it's going to be very good for them, as is the portal class, if assuming they're like I said a minute ago, they have the most NIL, I believe. That's like what's been reported by sources that are pretty accurate. But when you do look at like revenue, their football team does make the most revenue. So money and resources, they've got that for recruiting. Plus, Texas is just a hotbed for talent. Like you can recruit your own backyard and put together 24 stars, and maybe a 5-star in there. So I think that with them, recruiting is pretty set in stone. It would take a major mess up on their part to lose, to be worse than 15th in the country. But I also, until they stop going 8-5 every year, I don't think they're gonna be able to take guys away from Texas. If the best players in Texas are being recruited, for instance, like Decory Moore ended up going to Oregon. You've got the defensive end, I'm blanking on his name, who just committed to Texas, who was a 5-star between Tamu and them. Houston got a 5-star quarterback. So I feel like if you're Texas A&M, like you don't quite have as much dominance to be in the nines, but I money and talent in the area, you're going to be in the eights for sure.
Texas Tech is also killing transfer portal
Yes.
recruiting. They're really coming up. You're right. We have an 8.5. We have the same answer.
Yeah.
I think the only reason it's not higher is Texas A&M fans are rightfully so a little impatient right now. They
Mhm.
had the best recruiting class in the history of recruiting class. I'm not like exaggerating here by like 24/7 numbers and stat. Like they had an unbelievable recruiting class. Most of those guys transferred out, or it didn't work out, or
Mhm.
they had problems with them, and that goes back into what I said earlier about just last year was about getting organized, and this year's probably building
Yeah.
on that. And then, like you said, the 2026 class is looking even better than all of that. So, Elko's taking a slower approach, but in terms of recruiting, they're rock solid.
Yep.
Program hope trajectory, we've kind of covered it. We're very similar here again. Where do you have them?
Yeah, I got an 8.7. Don't need to say much more than what I said for recruiting. The one addition I will make to that, I do think Mike Elko is a good coach. He took a dead program at Duke that no one even wanted it to be resurrected, and he resurrected it anyways. That's always a good sign. I think he can do that at Texas A&M. I would have hope for them. They do feel like they are just going to go 8-5 forever. They just kept doing that before Mike Elko last year. Like you said, it wasn't more organized. I think a more hopeful season. Still ended up going 8-5. So I think it's not going to be a higher number until we see something different. But when you have the most money in the country and you're in Texas, that's a good sign. So I'm going to go with an 8.7.
It, yeah, I have him at an 8.5 there for program hope. There's not much else to say there. Let's go to hot seat meter. Where do you have him on a hot seat? Remember, reverse order, reverse
Yep.
ranking.
I gave him a 9. It's only been 1 year. Gave him a 9. It wasn't like a magical year to make it a 10. I think he's got plenty of safety, though. They would have to really stink for him to get on the hot seat.
Yeah, I have him at an 8, mainly because on one hand, Texas A&M just paid $74 million to fire Jimbo Fisher. I don't think Elko's buyout is that high or nearly that high, but I don't think their boosters are going to want to pay any buyout in the near future about for their head coach. The only thing I'll say is I alluded to this. Texas A&M fans, rightfully so, are impatient. They keep
Mhm.
winning the off season, quote unquote. But like you said, they have this 8-5 curse, or 7-6, 9-4. They haven't gotten over the hump. Let's say Marcel Reed isn't the guy this year. And I know I'm supposed to be ranking these going into the year. Let's say Marcel Reed's not the guy. It could get ugly in the fan base pretty quickly. But
Yep.
for now, I have him at an 8. I don't expect anything to happen realistically this year to push it up anywhere closer to a 3 or a 2 for a hot seat. But maybe it'll go up to a 6 or 5. I don't know. The last one, kind of a fun one because I don't think he's really talked about much in college football circles. Let's go out to the Bay Area, go to Cal. Let's talk about Justin Wilcox. Where
Justin Wilcox.
where
Oh,
do
sorry, I
you?
didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no,
Almost
no.
an Oregon Duck. That
Almost
was
an
what I was going
Oregon
to say.
Duck. Remember the yeah? I mean, we all remember the infamous letter. Oh, by the way, our ranking for Mike Elko was 8.2 on average, so
Oh, yes, good
pretty
shot.
high. On pretty high. Justin Wilcox, like Jace said, we all remember the infamous letter where he Oregon alums reached out to the athletic director trying to get them to hire Justin because they were tired of coaches leaving. Well, I'm pretty sure Oregon fans are pretty happy they're not. Uh, so we're in year 9 of Justin Wilcox. Where do you have him coaching performance?
4.5. I think he's made he's 1-3 in bowl games. So he's made 4 bowl games. He's never really had an impressive season. They've never really flirted with any Pac-12 or ACC championships. They've never really put any like crazy Heisman contenders out there. They haven't produced a whole lot of NFL talent. They have some high-end draft picks at the quarterback position, but he's been lackluster. He's been there for 9 years, and he hasn't really done anything more than no name bowl game appearances that were not exciting for the fans or anything of that nature. And I think he's given them like 9 years of boring football. So I've got him at 4.5. I think just below like the average. Five would be like my average standard, just below that because it's Cal. They have a lot of. It's hard to recruit there. It's hard to get kids to go to Cal. There's a lot of academic standards that their athletic programs have to hold to that a lot of other schools don't have to. But nothing to call home about.
I think I have him at a 5.5. It's 8 years, 4 bowls, 1 win. There's not.
The guy's
That's all you
average
need.
is
Yeah, he's about as average as you can be. 42-50 in those 8 years. I I want to say this in like the nicest way because we're not like you said we're not rating them or ranking them or his performance based on standards that Ohio State has or Georgia has. If they had an 8 year period where they went 42-50, all hell will break loose in Athens or
Mhm.
Columbus. But it's just been frustrating because I had high hopes for Wilcox and Cal. There were, especially after they got out of the rut. I was like, oh man, their offense is really good. Their defense sucks. And then, oh man, their defense is really good. Their offense sucks. And there was never a time where they found a way to blend those together. They brought on Brian Harsin this year. They have Nick Rolovich, two pretty crazy names if you have been following college football in the last 5 years. And now they have Ron Rivera as their GM. I would say in terms of coaching performance, it's been as average as you can be. There's been nothing
Mhm.
inspiring about it. Recruiting, I would also argue nothing inspiring.
Yeah.
Where do you have him there?
I have them at sorry, cruising a little slow. I'm at a 3.8. Once you get below four, it gets hard to like it's bad. It's hard to assign a number to, especially because it's our first like bad recruiter that we're really putting down here. 3.8. I like the Ron Rivera GM move. I hope that helps them for recruiting. They're in the state of California. There's a lot of talent out there. So like if they can figure out something to start getting some kids, they had I'm not even gonna try to say his name. They had the 5-star quarterback for a minute there. They could potentially get better at recruiting, but they've never been in like inside the top 30. They're like rarely inside the top 40. The move to the ACC, I don't think helps the recruiting at all. It's like, hey, it's still a crappy. It's actually even a worse football conference, and you have to travel 2,000 miles every time you want to play a football game. Uh,
Yeah, I have him at
yeah.
3.35 for recruiting. The thing that turned me off on Cal recruiting in general 2021 or 2020, I don't know. I was listening to a podcast with Wilcox as the guest, and
Okay.
at that point, the season was almost over, and they basically talked about. They asked him, "How do you feel recruiting is going?" He's like, "Really well." And I parked my car once, and I looked up the recruiting. They had 12 commits, and it's not just like a numbers game, obviously, but it's also like value and quality of player. But it's like you said, it's hard to get players into Cal because of their academic standards. It's hard to get players to be interested in flying 2,000 miles. Like, hey, you're you're not that far from the Pacific Ocean, but you're going to play in the Atlantic Coast Conference. It doesn't make sense to anybody. So their stadiums construction is off. That a lot of their projects have failed. I can't blame it all on Wilcox, but he is the head man, so it has to start somewhere. So
Yep.
that kind of takes us right into the program hope and trajectory. I have them at a 2.75. I'm looking at that, and I feel like that's a little low because it's not often that a program hires a new GM, brings in a new OC who has had Brian Harsin has had success, and
Mhm.
he was an utter failure at Auburn, but he has had success. Nick Rolovich, we don't want to get into exactly why he parted ways with Washington State, but he was very successful at Hawaii. So they have coaching talent offensively, and they just brought in a 5-star quarterback. So there should be hope. I just at some point it's funny because we just argued with Dan Lanning of you got to give him like expecting national championship through 4 years is crazy, even though it could be done. We're entering year 9 of Wilcox. At some point, you gotta believe what the guy's trying to tell you who he is. Um, where do you have him?
I have him at a 3.5, and the only reason why I have it bumped up is the program hope is getting rid of Wilcox and maybe moving forward in a different direction. I think that would be the only reason why I haven't bumped up a little bit.
I, hey, I real would that job be? Where would that job be like interesting wise? Like obviously
It's a
people
good
would take
question.
it, but I don't know where their NIL funding is right now. I don't know how much donor support they have. Like we said, 3,000 miles away, 2,000 miles away to play every away game. Is that like an attractive job outside of just being a Power
I
Five
don't
program?
know. I was thinking about that earlier. I don't think so. I don't just the ACC doesn't really move the needle, I think, football wise, the
Yeah,
way that some people might think it does. Especially Cal has never been known as a football school. Maybe if you're lucky, like you can find some really, I mean, they're gonna have really wealthy alumni. Maybe you can
yeah.
try to tap into them and say, you give me a name you want as this new head coach, and give me some checks and we'll make it happen. So I don't know. I can't imagine it being super attractive. You'd need like a Jared Goff to like when he finally retires to be like, all right, I'm turning this shit around. I think that's their
Yeah,
only chance, or like a Marshawn Lynch or something.
you need some like player acknowledgement of like, oh, this program's cool. Come here, like in the least
Yeah.
creepy way possible. Um, hot seat meter. What are we thinking?
3.5. I think he's one really bad year, two, another 5 and 7 years away from getting the axe.
It's funny because I thought you said he's 5 to 7 years away from getting the axe. Um,
Oh, no.
I look, I have him at a 4. I think he could get fired this year. I think he could get fired in five to
Mhm.
seven years. It just depends on what the sense of urgency is at Cal, like head coach wise. Don't worry, your hair looks beautiful.
It's tickling my forehead. I need to get it cut. It got long on that trip.
I hey, like I said, when I did the solo show last week, there was like we were like 3 or 4 minutes into it, and I was like, man, I'm just sweating. Like I just kept like rubbing my head, and I'm like, I really hope Jace comes back soon because it was fun to do it, but it was necessary that we have this ability for me to put you on the cam and me to fix whatever's going on. All right, 3.86 is our final rankings for Justin Wilcox. So that puts Dan Lanning first right now of our three coaches, 9.39. Then it's Mike Elko at 8.2. Uh, then Justin Wilcox at 3.86. If you have any coaches you want us to just have this conversation about, feel free to send us text, comment, DM, whatever you prefer to do. We would love to talk about your school's coach or your rival's coach. Like I said at the beginning of this segment, we're gonna try to, if we talk about this as often as we're recording, we're gonna have a vast group of coaches and like a fun ranking system for everyone to follow. But right now we have three. Let's move into one of the main conversations that's been surrounding the land. Arch Manning, the nephew of Eli and Peyton, as if you don't know, he's going to be starting quarterback for Texas, presumably. And a lot of people have differing opinions on him. Is he going to be elite, or is he going to be a bust? He was the number one quarterback out of high school, probably I think one of the best recruits, if not the best recruit ever. I think he was
Yeah.
as close to the 1.0 rating as we've ever seen. Regardless, former Georgia quarterback Aaron Murray came out on a radio show and he said, I'm not sold like so many other people that this guy's going to be the number one pick in the NFL draft, that he's just going to be unbelievable, that he's going to be the next coming of Peyton and Eli. But that's Peyton and Eli, but that's mobile. If you're so good and everyone has you projected as the number one pick in the NFL draft come 2026, why in the hell are you not playing above a seventh round quarterback? There, he's of course referring to Quinn Ewers being drafted in the seventh round, the quarterback who Arch sat behind for the last 2 years. We'll get into where we think Arch is in general. I do want to point out one thing that he said that is interesting. Last year at this time, Carson Beck was a presumptive number one overall pick. Now,
Mhm.
and Quinn Ewers was number two presumptive number one overall pick in this past 2025 NFL draft. Now, Carson Beck went to Miami instead of going to the draft. So we don't know exactly where he would have been drafted or if he would have been drafted. But I can promise you he wouldn't have been drafted in the top five.
Yeah,
Quinn
well, he would
Ewers,
not have been drafted in the first 3 rounds.
yeah, probably not. Quinn Ewers, not drafted until the seventh round. Now, that's where like everyone who gets pissed off about these what's it called, these year out NFL mock drafts, they need to take a step back. But it's also like that's where the hype is. If you look at the Heisman odds that we have on the screen, Arch is number one in Heisman odds. He has the best odds to win the Heisman. If you look at the national championship odds, Texas has the best odds to win the national championship. So there's a lot of, and I know my screen's jumping, but there's a lot of like hype on them. So Jace, I'm going to turn it over to you. Where are we with Arch? Do you think he is as good as advertised, or is he going to be down the middle somewhere?
I think he'd be down the middle somewhere, but on the good end. I feel like his name carried him pretty heavily in the recruiting process, and we like got to see him a little bit firsthand when he was younger. Um, I don't know how much we can or cannot comment about like what he was like and everything, but we did get a firsthand look. And just based on personality and what I saw, I didn't think he was like, oh my God, this is the greatest quarterback I've ever seen or anything. But he's not bad. Like he's tall, he's athletic, he's got a strong arm. All those things can, a good coach can turn that into a superstar quarterback. I do think had he been a better football player, he would have gotten the keys from Quinn Ewers at some point last season. Quinn Ewers makes total sense going into that season last year as the starting quarterback. He had just led you to playoff, if I'm remembering correctly. You were one of the favorites to win the championship. He was a Heisman favorite. He was projected first pick. Season went on. There was concerns about is he injured because he doesn't look good.
Is he a little
And Texas,
small?
he's a little small. They were winning games, but they weren't humming the way that I think people thought Texas was going to be a
Yeah.
machine, and they just kind of weren't hitting that stride. And I do think if Arch Manning was the real deal, at some point he would have been thrown in. But they just kept using him like as gadget plays and like random little scrambles and QB sneaks and stuff, which he looked good when he was in. But again, it was like QB designed runs and stuff, so it's hard to tell. I
Well,
think
you're
he will be at the end of this. Oh, go
no,
for it.
no, go ahead.
I think at the end of the season, he will not be a Heisman finalist. And if he is, it's going to be because Texas is 12-0, 13-0, and he's just the quarterback of that team. Or his name might carry him. But I don't think he'll be a top four statistics quarterback. If you took all the QBs, took the name away, and gave me a blind sheet, I don't think I would pick him in the top four. But I do think he'll finish in the top 10. I think he'll come out in that like 7-8 range and be a solid starter, but not the best one in the country.
I think when you're talking about Arch, there's a good amount of factors here to consider. First of all, I don't, like you said, I don't know how much we can divulge from our experiences, limited experiences with Arch, but we have been
Hmm.
around him. And from what I know and had seen, he is as advertised personality wise. Has a good head on his shoulders. He understands the role his family has had too, and in football. And I think that explains why a kid coming in with that level of fame out of high school, that level of notoriety too, where people just want to hate on him for no reason. That explains why that guy is. Those kids are essentially like expected to start day one. Arch was
Hmm.
expected to start day one. People were talking about him day one. If you remember, you were right. They made Quinn Ewers was coming off a playoff appearance. They lost to Washington 2 years ago in the
That's
playoffs.
right.
And if you remember the media days, no one was around Quinn. Everyone was around the backup quarterback, Arch Manning. Everyone was asking him questions. So the fact
And
that
Quinn
he's
played amazing in that
yeah,
game.
Quinn played awesome, and the fact that he's not the type of kid, or maybe it's family related, maybe it's him, but someone made the decision to just not throw a fuss. You'll wait your turn. You'll earn your role, and you'll play your games when it's your time. And we saw him play last year, and I think in the limited time he was very good. Now, with that said, if you ask me, is he going to be a Heisman finalist? I don't know. If you ask me, is he going to be good. I would probably say probably. Like,
Mhm.
yeah. I think he. I don't think just because his last name is Manning is that he was the best recruit ever. I think he has all the measurables. I think he. It's annoying, and I can't imagine how he must feel. Where like he's gonna get a lot of Peyton and Eli comparisons, but mobile. Where like those are two of the best quarterbacks the NFL has ever had, or at least Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, depending on what you think of them. So that comparison game is annoying. Yeah, I think he could be great. My concern with him is we go back to Oregon. Oregon's also trotting out a former 5-star quarterback this year. But their first 3 games, let me tell you, they have Montana State, Oklahoma State, and Northwestern. All due respect to those programs, that's plenty of time to ease in a young quarterback who you might not be sure about.
Yep.
You know who Texas has week 1?
Ohio State.
Yeah. And
Big noon.
big, probably, yeah, big noon. So do I necessarily think like it's going to start out terribly? No. Ohio State is replacing a lot of guys, but they're a reload team. They're going to be good. So that'll be a really good test of where Arch is, chemistry wise with his receivers and offensive line, play calling wise with his head coach. I've rambled a lot here. I think he could be great. I just feel like everyone. I don't know. I feel like people who are saying he's either the next coming of like pick your favorite quarterback ever, or he's going to be the biggest bust ever. He's somewhere in the middle. And
Yeah, definitely.
the one thing people aren't talking about, and I promise I'll let you talk after this. One thing people aren't talking about is we don't know what his mindset is going into this year. He has 2 more years of eligibility, so he might not even want to go into the NFL draft next year. He might be coming back at this
Yeah.
point next year, and that's when we'll have a better idea of where he is, where Texas is.
Yeah. I think the my last thing with Arch, I do think his last name is lifting him a little bit further than it would if that wasn't his last name. Not that I think he's a bad quarterback, but look, if you look at, you alluded to Dante Moore, or Julian Sand is another good example. Like Dante Moore and Julian Sand were as hyped up and talented and like elite as Arch Manning was when they were in high school. They also didn't have like this crazy successful freshman year where they just took off. Similar to Arch Manning, it took them a couple years. They got in some games. Dante Moore did start, but had a bad UCLA team. And both those guys, like Julian Sayin is what, fourth, I think, on Heisman odds, and Dante Moore is not even in our graphic here, because he's probably in that like 8 to 15 range, I would imagine. But both those guys, everybody's saying, there's question marks. They haven't been good yet. I want to see it first. But for some reason, Arch Manning gets this free pass in the media of everyone's already stamping him first overall pick. You're going to win the Heisman. And I think that's a little premature. I think if we're going to take these 5-star quarterbacks and say, hey, I want to see it before we actually label you that, I think we need to give that same statement to Arch Manning. But I do think because he's a Manning, he kind of gets a free pass over that. So I think Dante Moore will be really, really good. I think Julian Sand will be really good. I think Arch Manning will be really good. But I don't think it's fair to call Arch Manning the best quarterback in the country when he hasn't really played 4 quarters in a row. So
Yeah,
we shall see.
for me, you look at this list, and for our podcast listeners, if you're not watching on YouTube, we have a graphic up of the current Heisman odds. Arch Manning's number 1 plus 700. Cade Klubnik's number 2, 900. Garrett Nussmeier, LSU quarterback, 900. Julian Sayin and Jeremiah Smith round out the top 5 in terms of Heisman odds. And I wish I had the Heisman odds today from last year and saw where people expected. Yeah, please find that. Saw where people expected last season to play out. I would imagine it was a lot of what happened, because there were a lot of like favorites there. But if you look at Arch, he hasn't done nearly enough, obviously, in college as Garrett Nussmeier and Cade Klubnik. And both of those guys are supposed to have good teams too. It's not like those guys are on like 500, just above 500 teams. Clemson is one of the favorites to win the national championship, or should be. not in our odds, but like they should be. Garrett Nussmeier,
Yep.
if LSU figures out their defense, they should have a very good team. Now, it's funny, this top five list, Jeremiah Smith isn't even eligible for the NFL draft next year. But if I told you next year's draft goes Manning, Klubnik, Nussmeier, that's exactly what this Heisman odds list is to me. It's nothing like, it's not necessarily obviously the betting markets have an idea, but that's, I think it's people thinking, all right, who could have the best season, who could be in the NFL draft next year, and they basically just listed it one by one.
Mm. I
Yeah,
found the top five
tell
before
me.
like this is in August of 2024, so
Yeah,
not quite May, but
no, that works.
preseason. Dylan Gabriel, this is BetMGM. Dylan Gabriel plus 700 was the highest, and he did finish as a finalist. Carson Beck at plus 750, that did not pan out very well. Quinn Ewers at plus 1,000 had a good season, not a great season. Was not really anywhere kind of contending with the Heisman by the end of the year. And then Jalen Milroe, plus 1,000 as well, had a huge down year. Hopefully he can turn that around in the NFL. I'm rooting for him. I believe he's in Seattle now. But that, and then you have Jackson Dart, Will Howard, Nico. That rounds out the next three.
It
And
sounds
then
like
after
a
that,
lot
it's a
of what,
crapshoot.
yeah, it sounds like a lot of what didn't happen. Um,
Yep.
and I mean, Travis Hunter not even on that list. Like,
Yeah, Travis Hunter is not even on it. Cam Ward was plus 2,000. So they're notable.
I think where we should go with this conversation is we've talked about Arch himself, but like the hype that Aaron Murray was talking about in the quote. I think so many people are like way too quick to be like put him on this pedestal that, not being a hater, but he hasn't earned yet. And
Hmm.
he's number one in Heisman odds. Texas is number one in national championship odds. He's projected to go number one in the NFL draft. It's a little maddening to me. That's kind of just how I see it. But in terms of how he's going to play, yeah, he was pretty special when he got the spot start, filling in for Quinn. But how's he going to be in a full year SEC schedule? We'll just have to see.
Yep.
From there, we got another example of the demise of college football. That might have been too dark, but let's let's talk about USC and Notre Dame. So, for those that don't know, USC and Notre Dame have played 95 times dating back to 1924. The only years that they haven't, they missed some years because of World War II and COVID-19. Every other year that they've been able to play, they've played each other. It's been one of the longest running rivalries in college football. That we're entering the last year of their current contract to play each other year by year. USC has basically come out and said, we don't know if we're going to extend this. Last year at Media Days, Lincoln Riley said, we would love to extend it, but if it affects our ability to compete for national titles, then you got to look at it. Jace, where on like the things that suck list about college football, as much as you love college football, but the things that suck list, does this rank for you?
This is high. This is like top five. I think losing a tradition like this really sucks. And I think it points to a lot. I don't want to be doomsday, but it does point to a really negative direction that the sport is headed. When I feel like football used to have this mentality of like tradition and like I don't care who I line up against, I just want to win my games. I want to beat your ass. I feel like football used to have this like mean man mentality of just like I want to bash my head through you for 60 minutes. And I feel like the way the sport is going, and I'm not even necessarily faulting USC here, even though I have some things there, but the fact that it's advantageous for you and it's enough for you to consider, I need to cancel this tradition and this rivalry and I need to cancel this big game just to try and bid my way into playoffs and into chances for championships. It feels like we're kind of losing ourselves by the way the sport's getting set up if this is becoming like a serious thing, because it once one team backs out of a tradition game, you're going to see it happen a lot more. Obviously, conference ones you can't, but if USC and Notre Dame break this tradition, every other rival and every other traditional non-conference games, everyone's going to bit. Oh, why am I okay? If they do it, I can clearly cut this. Oregon's would be like, why do I need to play Oregon State then? They're going to cut that. Like
No,
all
they'd
these
love to
teams are
play
going to
Oregon
start
State.
cutting.
Oregon State wouldn't want to play
That's
Oregon.
true. That's true. All these teams are going to start backing out of their unadvantageous rivalry. And like in this case, USC is 1-5 against Notre Dame in the last 6 years. And a lot of those 5 losses, they got their ass kicked. So like it makes sense for them to back out of this game. It's a game they like can't really seemingly win right now. And no offense to Lincoln Riley, I don't think it's a game he's going to win for the next couple of years. I just think Notre Dame's in a better spot. So I get what they're coming from, but the fact that we're creating an atmosphere where that's even like a plausible, realistic solution is we're losing ourselves. That's a scary
Yeah.
thought. You don't want that first domino.
The So let's revisit this line. Notre Dame and USC have played each other 95 times dating back to 1924. The only times they haven't was World War II and COVID 19.
Crazy.
So now
It
you're essentially, what we're talking about here is USC is considering canceling this series because playing Notre Dame would hinder or become a roadblock to their goals of winning national championships or making the college football playoff. So what we're talking about here is a war, a pandemic, and being scared to play a team. One of those things is not like the other. And
I wish I had the Charmin Ultra Soft like meme I could put up for
I
this.
I would have I could have prepped that. Just let me know. No,
check
but
Twitter to all your listeners. Check Twitter in a little bit.
exactly. For me, it's like we lost Bedlam 2 years ago, with
Hmm.
and that game was electric, and obviously it was a casualty of conference realignment. I guess what for me, it's not me calling USC soft or me calling like Lincoln Riley scared or like I said scared to play big game. No, I'm sorry. Like I can't even be mad at USC because you have to be like you said mad at college football and the powers that be in the NCAA and the Big Ten conference and the SEC conference and throughout all the powers of college football that allowed for an environment for this to be advantageous for USC to consider.
Hmm.
The fact that this system not only allows USC to say, "Oh no, we're not going to do something that we've done for 95 years," but it's also shouldn't playing a team like that be something that alpha athletes, type A coaches, type A players want to line up for, want to get their teams better for. Now, you're right. It's going to hurt USC's chances of making a playoff. They have a tough schedule some years in the Big Ten. The Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, they're not going to be hard to. They're not going to be easy to face off with. And then you add on what's it called? You add on Notre Dame. Notre Dame just lost the national title, so it makes complete sense for me. It's like I want to be mad at USC or Lincoln Riley or the athletic director for having this thought even come up, but I can't be because this is college football powers screwing up the sport once again.
Yep, agreed. And it's kind of ironic when the BCS era was a thing. A big complaint about that was, oh, is this computer actually ranking? Like if you're a USC in the past, you had to schedule these games it because the computer just for whatever metrics they put into it just said, oh, you're a Pac-12 team, they knocked you down. So, you had to schedule big games out of conference to actually make up for it. And it's funny because people hated that era when in reality, at least it was set up in a way that kind of incentivized you like, hey, we do need to start scheduling some better teams, even the 14 playoff, because at that point it was like, hey, if we're 11-2 and they're 11-2, but their 2 losses are Notre Dame and Oregon, and our 2 losses are, Northern Illinois and West Virginia, so you had to schedule these big games. But now with such a big playoff, it's like we can get away with 2 losses. Why even flirt with another one? So I They need
That's
to do some rethinking and recalibrating here about what we're doing with the sport.
that's actually really interesting the way you put that. For me, I wonder if the 14 team playoff structure that we talked about 2 weeks ago is going to help or fix that, help or break it more. Because if you think about it, if the Big Ten has four auto bids, obviously the number one goes on, and then
Hmm.
three plays six, four plays five. But that's Big Ten record. You're telling me USC
Yeah,
at that point wouldn't be like, we're going to play for the 5 or 6 seed. We're going to keep a tradition alive, and then we're going to see how it goes from there. That
that's actually a great point. I didn't think of it that way. Then you just have to finish sixth. Yeah,
and you're not aiming to finish sixth. You're aiming to finish first. But I wonder if the 14 team playoff structure would alleviate concerns like this that some programs have. I think a lot of programs going into like every year or every playoff, there's always the haters out there that are like, who have they played? Who have they played? It's Indiana last year, and a lot of times those teams come like lose a big game because they haven't played anybody. We don't want to get to the point with college football where it's the NBA. The regular season just there's not a lot of marquee matchups. You're scared to play big games that unless your conference forces you to play them, just because you're shooting to play in December and January for the playoff. And I just hope we're not going down that road.
yeah, me too.
So we have covered our four coaches. We have covered Arch Manning. We've talked about programs, traditions potentially dying in college football. We're under an hour right now, which is impressive. Let's go. Let's cap off the show in a little fun way. One game, new segment. The Aer Lingus matchup in Ireland, August 23rd. Can't Iowa State at Kansas State. I guess they're both on the road. They're in Ireland. I know it's far out, but we want to start testing our knowledge and start keeping track of our picks a little bit. Where do you have this matchup? Where do you think it's going to lie? And who you got?
Yeah, the current line is Kansas State -3.5, which I'm pretty shocked by. I like Iowa State +3.5 there, and if you are someone that likes plus signs, then I even like Iowa State money line. Um, they they return Rocco Beck, which is big. Matt Campbell every offseason is a big name. I think that teams are always looking to hire. Stayed at Iowa State again. They return a lot of talent from last year. The big knock that people are going to have for Iowa State are going to be they lost Jane Higgins and Jalen Noel, both Houston Texans. But they retooled with getting Chase Sowell, the wide receiver. He's the 6'4", 200-pound big body receiver that Jane Higgins was. And they got Xavier Townsend from Eastern Carolina, who's that quick small body slot guy that Jalen Noel was. So the two real losses that team faced last year, I thought they did a really good job retooling those. I'm not saying they're going to just be copy paste versions, but I do think that gives them a very competitive replacements at wide receiver, because that was really your biggest loss in the offseason. I do think Rocco Beck is an incredibly underrated quarterback. And I like Iowa State this year. I think game one, playing in a different country, you want continuity, especially at the quarterback position. You want to have confidence in the staff. You want to have confidence in your offense. And I think they return a lot of that. And I don't want to say addressed the secondary needs in the portal. They got a couple of like 3-star, decently rated corners. But if you saw Iowa State's pass defense last year, it was pretty rough at times with small body corners. So they did at least upgrade size at the corner position, and I like them in this game. Aer Lingus is also a great name. I just wanted to say that.
Phenomenal name. Um, what a game! What like this is one of those games that if you're a diehard college football fan, outside of Army Navy, to you wish sometimes maybe that would be the kickoff of college football season. Having this matchup in Ireland, Big 12 matchup, everyone can just sit back watch football. Like you don't even have to
Yep.
have a lean on either side. I find it funny that we call the Big 12 the conference of 3.5 point spreads, and the first game that we're talking about is a 3.5 point spread. I'm like you. I got Iowa State right now. Rocco Becht, I think, is criminally underrated.
Hmm.
I think if he was at, they're at a Power Four program, but if he was at Ohio State, if he was at Texas, if he was at Oklahoma, everyone would be talking about him a lot more. And he's one of those
Hmm.
guys that we, as a podcast, we and the podcast space in general isn't talking about. He is, like I said, criminally underrated. They have the pieces. Matt Campbell, when he has a talented team, um, he can really do some special things. I think people, when you think about Iowa State, they're not a reload program. They're a window program, and
Hmm.
they'll recruit well enough. They'll develop the players, and they'll circle a year, be like, "That's the year we're shooting for." And Rocco Beck coming into his second full year as a starter, this year might be the year that they're shooting for. Doing some special things in the Big 12 and maybe the playoff. We saw how 2020 where they won the Fiesta Bowl against Oregon with Brock Purdy's last year. That was their window year. They had a couple down years rebuilding, reloading the roster, developing their kids. I think that's where Iowa State's gonna be fun to watch this year.
Hmm.
Ironically, Kansas State's also gonna be fun.
Yeah,
I'm very high on Chris Kleiman, the coach. I
the
don't
Big
think
12 will be a great conference this year to
I.
watch in terms of who's going to win it.
Oh yeah, because you could tell me 7 teams, and I'd be like, yeah, they have a shot.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think Iowa State's got a shot, Kansas State's got a shot, Arizona State, Texas Tech. I could keep going, but there's just so many teams out there in the Big 12.
Where are you at with Avery Johnson? Where do you stand with him?
Dude, he's your prototypical college quarterback that has all the tools, but he just hasn't fully put it together yet. I think if one of the reasons they are favored is Kansas State is probably a better team in terms of talent profile, and Avery Johnson might be equal in terms of talent profile or better than Rocco Beck. You might disagree, but Avery Johnson, I think he can still do some special things. I think people who were giving him Heisman odds last year or Heisman
Hmm.
consideration entering the year, they had no idea what they were talking about. He's a special kid, special quarterback on a probably dangerous team. It's just they didn't put it all together. I that's the best answer I can give you on that.
Yeah, no, they were. I'm looking. So he was same odds as Cam Ward and Riley Leonard to win the Heisman last year.
Wow.
He had a pretty bad year last year. He only completed 58% of his passes.
Yeah.
A lot of turnovers between his fumbling and interceptions, pushing 20 turnovers, which is also terrible. But yeah, like you said, insanely talented. Obviously, people thought he was going to be really good last year. So I'm with. He's one of those guys that could give you like a 350-yard, four touchdown, no turnover game, or he could give you four turnovers, one touchdown, and complete 35% of his passes. Also, with it being in Ireland, if it is a rain game, I think that would really benefit Kansas State. Avery Johnson's kind of a running quarterback. The other big question with Kansas State is the offensive line is going to be four new pieces. You have three transfers, a redshirt senior who has never started before at center. You do return your right guard, but that's pretty tricky game one with four new linemen. Those moving pieces can be tough.
Yeah, I don't want both of us to picking Iowa State on the 3.5 to make it sound like we're down on Kansas State. Kansas State's going to be formidable this year. They are in the hunt for the Big 12. Um, there's just I think I have more question marks with Kansas State heading into Game One than I do with Iowa State. Matt Campbell just steady Eddie heading into Week One.
Yep.
They have question marks for sure, but just looking at this specific game, it's not like one team has that much further travel to get to Ireland. It's the both coaches are great. Both quarterbacks have a chance to be special. I got Iowa State plus 3.5 against Kansas State.
I'll be joining you on that one.
So we're gonna keep track of our picks too. Uh, I don't know how we're gonna want to do it during season. If we were gonna want to stick with these, we'll probably give ourselves before the game a chance to change our pick. Um, but
Yeah, the line will change, I'm sure, as will depth charts and stuff. But
yeah, so that's the game for this week. There's a lot of odds that are coming out um, week by week as the season approaches. So we're gonna have a game at the end of every podcast that we're gonna kind of try to break down minimally and talk about. Now to actually cap off the show, we got Jace's top 10, but an informal one. Jace, welcome back from your trip. Um,
thank you.
First of all, tell everyone where you went and what was your top moments. I think there is
Yeah.
one.
So yes, I think you know what number one's going to be. I went to Spain and then Portugal. Spain, it was Barcelona, which I had been there before, but it's one of my favorite cities in the world. Definitely wanted to go back. Then went to Madrid. My first time in Madrid. Went to an Atletico Madrid game. It was awesome. And then we putzed on over to Porto in Portugal. And then we did a trip in the Douro Valley, which is like one of the wine regions of Portugal. And then we went down to Lisbon for the last handful of days. And that's where we ended it. Number one thing that happened on the trip was probably the Let's Go. I'm just kidding. I am now an engaged man. I proposed to my girlfriend on a private boat cruise in Lisbon. It was her family and my family together. So that was definitely a very exciting, very emotional, fun, just celebratory night. So the actual proposal and then the night was number one. Number two was probably how well I slept after that night because I was so nervous and just like thinking over my words like the next first couple nights that I like wasn't sleeping, just like, oh, what am I gonna say? What am I gonna say? How am I gonna do this? So that night I slept like 12 hours. I slept like a baby. So that was number two. I'll give you the Atletico Madrid game for number three. That was a unique. I've never been to a soccer match in my life. Watched them on TV, played FIFA video game a handful of times, but never experienced one. It was awesome. It's nothing like American sporting events, which I was not like prepared for. It's very like quiet. American sports we cater to like the experience. A lot of food, a lot of drinks, alcohol, that kind of stuff. They played American songs like leading into the game, like Thunderstruck and songs like that. But then once the game started, like you can get popcorn, you can get Diet or a Coke or Coke Zero, bag of chips and a water, and then everyone's just sitting watching. It's pretty quiet unless something crazy happens. But it was a really cool experience. There was also some crazy goals in that game. In the first like 10 minutes, there was like a 35-yard free kick, 35-meter free kick that went in. So great game. Number four, I love octopus. It's one of my favorite foods in the world. You don't really get great octopus in the United States. Spain, phenomenal octopus. So ate a lot of that when I was there. And number five, probably just spending great time with family, friends. It's me and my siblings like don't get to be in the same city together super often at this point. So whenever I do, it's always a blast. And I love my girlfriend, or my fiance's family. I get better at saying that. My family as well. So to have all of us together was just a lot of fun.
Two things, three things. One, congratulations.
Thank you.
Formally in person or through podcast, whatever. Secondly, I thought it was going to be interesting because the last couple of podcasts we've done together, we have mentioned our significant others, and
Mhm.
I feel like maybe it's wrong, but I feel like you've gotten into for Boat's fiance, my girlfriend. Like I feel like you've almost spoiled
Yeah,
it
you
for
have to
yourself.
break it up awkwardly. It's
uh,
also an awkward. It doesn't flow well when we have to like break it up. One like, oh, this and that, and then yes, I almost spoiled it. And you did a great job on the podcast last week, not saying anything in case
Thank
like
you.
Lydia had listened to it. So that was good.
I I told you this over text, but I was really nervous of like I didn't text you about like, hey, when's the big day? Like, what's going on? Because I was like, what if she sees it? What if she sees a text and something comes like comes into her mind of like, oh, is something happening? Um, but no, I'm glad it all went well. I think it was funny about your sleep because I'm looking at I have an aura ring and we'll cap
Okay.
it shortly, but if you ask my fiance Morgan about the day before I proposed, I there was one point where I went up to her. It was we were at my parents' house, and I was like, I'm like really anxious right now, and like it was like to a point where like I was a little worried, That's why I told
Okay.
her. And then I checked my aura ring, and I'm not gonna be able to show you this on the stress, but like that is my stress levels the night before. And then the day of, it was all stress. The day after, everything was low. Like,
Yep.
in terms of anxiety, because it's not like either of us were afraid that they were going to say no, but it was like, this
Yeah.
is that life moment. And welcome to the Engaged Boys Club. Flag for Discussion is now officially an engaged podcast.
Well, look at us go, man. Who would have thought we would be here?
Who'd have thunk it? On that note, uh, I'm also very impressed that you had a top five just ready. Like it may,
That was going as it went.
and then I guess from there, we'll congratulate you one more time. But Jace, I want to also bring up the fact that everyone can follow our Twitters, flagged F for discussion, YouTube flagged for discussion, TikTok flagged the number four discussion. Just because Jace is engaged doesn't mean the toaster bet's off. When we get to 50, someone's getting a toaster.
Yep.
I, Jace is gonna text me if we get to
You know
50.
it's
It's gonna be like, are we actually getting a toaster for someone?
I'll send someone a toaster. I'll do it. I'm trying to see if I can get like F4D customized. So when you get your toast to come up, it's like toasted in the middle.
Yeah,
That's the hope.
that is the goal. But like, I feel like if we start at 50 subs for a toaster, what's the 100? Like, we're gonna have
That's
to.
my day job can cover a toaster, but if we start going deeper, this thing needs to start picking up some cash.
We might need to just make toasters our 50 every 50 for a while. Um, all right. So those are our socials. As we always say, you can find us anywhere where you get your podcast, your Apple Podcast, Spotify. We're on Audible. We're on YouTube. We're everywhere you can find us. We obviously prefer if you find us on YouTube, just because you get to see our lovely faces. But if you are on the go, as I am a lot, I listen to a lot of podcasts just through the audio version. So we appreciate however you get it. Like, follow, subscribe, all the good stuff. Jace, got anything else? Welcome back.
No, it was a great show. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah. So, with that being said, I'm Farbod Markazi. He's Jace Hatfield. It's been Flag for Discussion.